Hey everyone! If you've ever wondered how you can build your very own private, super secure corner inside the massive public world of Amazon Web Services, well, you've come to the right place. Today, we are going to demystify what is probably the single most important networking piece in all of AWS, the Virtual Private Cloud, or VPC.
So let's just start with that fundamental question, right? You're using this huge shared public cloud infrastructure. So how in the world do you carve out your own little private, isolated, and secure network space inside of it? Well, that is the exact problem the VPC was built to solve. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to talk about what a VPC actually is, using a really simple analogy. Then, we're going to pop the hood and look at the blueprint, all the little moving parts. After that, we'll check out the move-in ready option that AWS gives you, and then dig into why you'd want to build your own from the ground up. And finally, we'll cover the rules of the road, the limits you got to be aware of. All right, section 1. What in the world is a VPC? Honestly, the best way to get your head around it isn't to think of some crazy complex cloud thing, but to think about something you already use every single day: your home network.
The source material just hits the nail on the head with this one. A VPC is basically your home network. You've got your router, all your devices are connected, you control what gets in and out. Now just imagine that exact same setup, but it's backed by the insane power and scale of the entire AWS infrastructure. That is a VPC. Okay, so let's get official for a second with the formal definition. The two words to burn into your brain here are logically isolated. See, an Amazon VPC is your own private fenced-off area inside the gigantic AWS Cloud. It's a virtual network that you get to define and you get to control, and it's where you launch all your stuff, like web servers and databases. Now, this slide here shows a really important concept: scope. Notice how the VPC lives inside one single AWS region, like US East, but, and this is so crucial, it can stretch across multiple availability zones inside that region. And that, my friends, is the key to building applications that don't fall over.
And this just perfectly illustrates what's happening physically behind the scenes. A region, that's a big geographic area, right? Like Northern Virginia. But an availability zone, or an AZ, that's a distinct data center, or a few data centers, within that area. By spanning your VPC across multiple AZs, you're building a foundation for high availability. If one data center has a problem, your application can just keep on chugging along in another one.
So now that we've got the big picture of what a VPC is, let's move on to section 2 and really look under the hood. We're going to break down all the essential parts, the actual building blocks you'll use to put your own virtual network together. First up, subnets. So if your VPC is your virtual house, subnets are basically the individual rooms inside it. Each subnet is just a smaller slice of your VPC's IP address range, and here's the key: it's tied to one single availability zone. You use them to organize your resources, like maybe you put all your web servers in one room and all your private databases in another, more secure room.
Okay, next up we have route tables. You can think of these as the GPS or maybe the signposts for your entire network. Every subnet gets a route cable, and it's just a set of rules or routes that tells the network traffic exactly where it needs to go. Hey, you're trying to get to the internet? Go this way. You're trying to get to that other subnet? Go that way. Simple as that. And how does that traffic get to the internet? Well, it goes through an internet gateway, or an IGW. This is the main front door to your virtual house. It's a fully managed AWS component that you just attach to your VPC, and boom, it allows communication between your resources and the big, wide internet. So we've got our house, we've got our rooms, we've got a door to the outside, but how big is our property? How many addresses do we even have to work with inside? That is defined by something called CIDR, that's CIDR, or Classless Interdomain Routing. It sounds complicated, but it's just the way you tell AWS how big of an IP address range your VPC is going to need. And this little cheat sheet here is just fantastic for getting your head around CIDR. See that number after the slash, like a /16 or a /24? That tells you how big the network is. A /32 is tiny, just one single IP address. A /24 gives you 256 addresses, and a /16 gives you thousands. Just remember, the smaller the number, the bigger the network. And just to put a real number on that, if you were to create a VPC with the CIDR block of 10.0.0.0/16, you're literally carving out a private network space with 65,536 available IP addresses for your stuff. That is a lot of room to build. Now, for what is maybe the most important part, security. AWS gives you two really powerful firewall-like tools to keep your resources safe. The first one, security groups, they act like a personal bodyguard for each individual server. And the second one, network ACLs, they're like the main security for an entire room, for a whole subnet. Using both of them together gives you what we call defense in depth.
All right, Section 3, the move-in ready option. Look, AWS wants to make it super easy for you to get started, so every single AWS account comes with a pre-configured default VPC right out of the box. So, this default VPC is all about speed and convenience. It's totally plug and play. Everything's already wired up to the internet, and any server you launch automatically gets a public IP address. It is the perfect little sandbox for testing a new idea or getting a simple web app online in just a few minutes, no networking degree required.
But for any serious, real-world production workload, you're going to want to move beyond that default. And that brings us to Section 4, the awesome power of building a custom VPC. So why would you even bother?
Honestly, the answer boils down to one word: control. With a custom VPC, you are the architect. You get to pick your own IP address space. You can design a public-facing area for your web servers and then build a completely walled-off private zone for your sensitive databases that has zero direct path to the internet. That kind of multi-layered security, that's the gold standard for production apps, and it gives you the power to really, truly customize your cloud.
And finally, let's jump into Section 5 and talk about the rules of the road. It's really important to know what the default limits are when you're sitting down to design your architecture.
So it's important to know that AWS sets some default limits on your account for each region. You can see some of the big ones here. But the key thing to understand is that these are mostly soft limits. They're really just there to keep you from accidentally spending a ton of money. If you have a real reason to need more, you can almost always just ask AWS support for an increase.
So let's wrap this all up. The key takeaway, the one thing you really need to remember, is this. The VPC isn't just another service. It is the foundational network building block for pretty much everything you do in AWS. Seriously, understanding how to design and secure a VPC is one of the most critical skills for working in the cloud. And that leaves us with a final question to think about for your own projects. When is the speed and convenience of that move-in ready default network the right call? And when do the massive security and organizational benefits make taking the time to build a custom one absolutely essential? Thanks for tuning in.